I knew something was off the second I saw my private property sign drifting down the creek like it had just given up on life, spinning slowly, half submerged, like even it was tired of arguing with idiots. That's when I said out loud, to nobody in particular, "All right, what did they do this time?" See, I didn't buy this place for drama. I bought it because it was quiet, tucked just outside a neighborhood that had one of those HOAs. You know the type, the kind that treats grass height like a federal offense and thinks a mailbox is a personality trait. But the land I bought, it sat just outside their official boundary. Barely, close enough to feel them breathing down my neck, but legally untouchable. And the best part, the creek. That creek wasn't decorative. It came with deeded rights. That meant fishing, sitting, drinking a beer, doing absolutely nothing. All of it mine. Not shared. Not community. Mine. And they hated that. Now the queen of this little suburban kingdom. Let's call her Denise Carter. Mid-50s, always walking around like she's campaigning for mayor of a place nobody voted her into, clipboard glued to her hand, sunglasses bigger than her authority. She had made it her personal mission to correct my existence. First it was my shed, too reflective. Then my mailbox, non-compliant, even though 3 other houses had the same one. Then a letter about visual harmony, which, I'm pretty sure, is not a real legal term anywhere outside her imagination. But this was new. I walked down toward the creek, boots crunching over the dirt, and before I even reached the bend, I heard its soft jazz. I'm not kidding. Smooth, Sunday brunch jazz. And then I saw them. 3 folding chairs. A cooler. Fishing lines cast straight into my water. And right in the middle of it, Denise, sipping something out of a metal tumbler like she was at a spa retreat. I cleared my throat, loud enough to echo. She turned slow, way too calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Oh, hey there," she said, all fake sweetness. "We figured since it's just a creek, it would be nice to share it with the community." I just stood there for a second, letting that sentence settle, like a bad smell. "I'm gonna stop you right there," I said. "You're on private property." One of the others, some guy I'd seen nodding behind her at meetings, laughed under his breath. "Relax, man, it's just water." That's when I pulled out the copy of my deed. Yeah, I kept it sealed in a plastic sleeve under my porch, because something told me I'd need it one day, and held it up. This says otherwise. From that bridge to the oak tree, that's mine. Denise didn't even look at it. She just waved her hand like she was dismissing a waiter. "We voted last month," she said. "The board approved shared access." And that was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with annoying neighbors anymore. I was dealing with people who genuinely believed they could vote reality into existence. "You can't vote on land you don't own," I said. She smiled. Not embarrassed. Not confused. Just confident. "We've been using it for weeks," she said. Weeks. I didn't argue after that. I didn't yell. I just nodded once, turned around, and walked back to my house. Because I had cameras. 4 of them. Wired, buried, running to a private server. Not the cheap kind you buy online. The kind you install when you've dealt with boundary issues before and you don't trust anyone with a clipboard. I hadn't checked them in a while. Last time I looked, it was just a raccoon trying to steal bait out of my tackle box. Harmless stuff. But now, I had a reason. I pulled up the footage, sat down at my kitchen table, and started scrolling back, a few days, then a week, then 2. And then I saw it. Not fishing, not lounging. A chainsaw, right there on my property. 3 people, Denise and 2 others, cutting down one of my trees like it was part of some weekend landscaping project. No hesitation. No permission. Just gone. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling that slow burn creep up my spine. And it didn't stop there. Next clip, they're dragging the trunk into position, using it like a bench. Another day, bags of gravel, dumped along the bank. Another, kids. 6, maybe more, splashing in the water while adults sat back drinking like they'd just built a resort. I paused the video. Just sat there. Quiet. Because at that point, this wasn't about a creek anymore. This was trespassing. Property damage. Liability issues. And the worst part? They didn't even think they were doing anything wrong. That's what really gets you. Not the act, but the confidence behind it. I printed everything. Timestamps, still frames, every angle, and locked the originals away. Then I made 2 calls. One to a friend of mine, real estate attorney, sharp as hell, owed me a favor. The second to the sheriff's office. Because if Denise Carter thought she could vote herself into owning my land, she was about to learn exactly how that works in the real world. All right, before we go any further, let me pause right here for a second, because what happened next only makes sense if you understand how these HOA situations actually work, and more importantly, how people like Denise think. So first, from a legal perspective, an HOA only has authority over properties that are explicitly within its jurisdiction. That's it. It's not vibes, it's not proximity, it's not, well, you're basically part of the neighborhood. No. If your parcel isn't listed in their governing documents, they have zero power over you. They can't fine you, they can't regulate you, and they definitely can't vote themselves access to your land like it's a shared gym membership. And here's where it gets interesting. According to standard procedure, any change to shared property, like opening access to a creek, requires ownership or legal easement. Not a board vote, not a majority opinion. Ownership, period. What Denise and her little committee did, that wasn't a gray area. That was trespassing. And once they started cutting trees and modifying the land, it crossed into property damage and liability territory real fast. But honestly, the law part, that's the easy part. The harder part is understanding why people do this in the first place. Because this is a psychological trap. People in small positions of authority, especially in HOAs, start to blur the line between managing rules and owning control. It's subtle at first, mailbox complaints, lawn height warnings, but over time, it escalates. They get used to people complying. No pushback, no consequences. And then one day, they run into someone who isn't actually under their authority. And instead of stepping back, they double down. Because admitting they were wrong would mean admitting that all that control they've been exercising, it was never real to begin with. And people don't give up perceived power easily. Which brings us back to my situation. Because Denise didn't just cross a line. She built a whole picnic area on the other side of it. By the time the deputy showed up that afternoon, I already had everything lined up, tablet charged, footage queued, stills printed, timestamps highlighted. I wasn't guessing anymore. I was presenting a case. He stood there in my backyard, arms crossed, watching the clips one by one. Chainsaw, tree falling, gravel dumping, kids in the water, and every few seconds he'd just nod slowly like, yeah, this is bad. Finally, he looked at me and said, "You want to press charges?" No hesitation. "Yeah," I said, "I do." And that's the moment things shifted. Because up until then, Denise and her crew were playing neighborhood politics, passive-aggressive notes, fake authority, little power plays. But the second law enforcement steps in, the game changes. Now it's not about opinions, it's about consequences. By the next morning, I had a case number. By the afternoon, my attorney, let's call her Rachel, had already reviewed my deed, easements, boundary lines, and she called me with something I didn't expect. "You're not in their HOA," she said. I laughed. "Yeah, I figured that." "No," she said. "I mean legally, you are not part of their jurisdiction at all. Not even adjacent in a way that gives them any authority. They've been issuing you notices and warnings with zero legal standing." I just sat there for a second, letting that sink in. "So everything they've sent me, potentially fraudulent," she said. And right there, that was the second turning point. Because now this wasn't just about them messing with my land. This was about a pattern. So we escalated. Filed civil claims. Filed for damages. Filed for injunction. And while all that was moving forward, the neighborhood started talking. You know how it goes. One person hears something, tells another, and suddenly everybody's got a story. And it turns out, I wasn't the only one. A couple down the street, fined over parking. A retired nurse, threatened with daily penalties over her driveway. A guy with a swing set for his kid, told it violated visual standards. Same pattern, same pressure. They just hadn't pushed back. Until now. Within days, people were coming over, bringing stories, documents, screenshots, asking if I could share the footage, if Rachel could look at their cases too. So we built a file. Not just mine, a whole folder. Patterns, evidence, names. And that's when the HOA panicked. They called an emergency meeting. Closed door. No residents. But Rachel? She walked right in. Legal representation. Full access. And she didn't come empty-handed. Every board member got a packet. Photos, legal notices, proof of jurisdiction limits, warning letters, the kind of paperwork that doesn't argue. It ends arguments. She told me later, Denise went pale. Not angry, not defensive, just pale. Because for the first time, she wasn't dealing with people she could intimidate. She was dealing with reality. The fallout was fast. One member resigned within 48 hours. Another tried to distance herself, claimed she wasn't fully aware. The third just stopped showing up. Didn't matter. The sheriff's office issued formal citations to everyone involved. Trespassing, property damage, endangerment. And here's the part that really hit them. Those fines? They couldn't use HOA funds. Personal liability. Out of pocket. Over $15,000 total. And that was just the beginning. Because once the county got involved, things went from local to serious real quick. An inspector came out, not to investigate me, but to audit them. Turns out, they'd been pushing boundaries, literally, on multiple properties. Encroachments. Unauthorized landscaping. Even part of their community garden was sitting on county land. Then environmental got involved. Apparently dumping gravel near a waterway without permits? That's a problem. A big one. Cease and desist orders. Violations. More fines. And just like that, the entire structure started collapsing. But here's where it gets wild. Because even after all that, after citations, investigations, resignations, you'd think they'd stop, right? No. A few weeks later, I get a letter from the county about a structure on my property. Something I never built. Attached was a blurry aerial photo. And the second I saw it, I knew. It wasn't my land. It was just past my boundary, county green space. But somehow, my parcel number was attached to the permit. I drove out there and found it. A wooden platform. Railings. Sign posted like it belonged to the HOA. Even had a warning about trespassing. I just stood there, hands on my hips, thinking, you've got to be kidding me. They were still doing it. Only this time, it wasn't just trespassing. It was fraud. We pulled the records. Permit filed under my parcel. Approved based on false information. Funds traced back to HOA accounts. That's when Rachel looked at me and said, this isn't civil anymore. And she was right. Within days, the district attorney got involved. Subpoenas went out. Financial records pulled. Emails reviewed. And what they found, it wasn't just one bad decision. It was a system. Fake reimbursements. Money routed through questionable vendors. Projects approved without authority. And that platform? It was supposed to be the start of something bigger. Expand control, redefine boundaries, make it look official after the fact. Only problem, they used the wrong parcel number. Mine. That mistake? That's what brought the whole thing down. Denise was arrested first. Early morning. No drama. Just two cruisers and a very quiet neighborhood watching from behind curtains. Then another board member. Then another. Charges stacked up. Fraud, conspiracy, falsifying records. Accounts frozen. HOA funds locked. And just like that, the organization that spent years telling people how to live couldn't even keep itself together. The final hearing? That was something else. Rachel laid everything out. Damages, legal violations, pattern of misconduct, and then handed over one last document. A petition, signed by dozens of residents, requesting the complete dissolution of the HOA board. And here's the irony. It passed using their own bylaws. Unanimous. The board was gone within a month. No restructuring. No second chances. Gone. The platform got torn down. The creek restored. The land repaired. And for the first time since I moved there, it was quiet again. No letters. No inspections. No one pretending they owned something they didn't. Just water moving through the creek, exactly where it was supposed to be. And me, standing on my land, where I always had the right to be. So yeah, that's how a quiet piece of land with a creek turned into a full-blown legal collapse of an HOA that thought it could rewrite reality with a clipboard and a vote. And if you're sitting there thinking, there's no way people actually act like that, I promise you they do. Just usually not all at once, not this obvious, not this sloppy. But here's the thing. This story isn't really about a creek. It's not even about Denise or the HOA. It's about something way more common and way more dangerous than most people realize. Because the lesson here is, power doesn't have to be real to feel real. And once people start believing in that version of power, they'll defend it, expand it, and justify it. Even when it crosses lines they know, deep down, they shouldn't be crossing. You saw it happen step by step, right? It didn't start with a chainsaw. It started with small stuff. Mailbox complaints, aesthetic rules, little nudges that people just accepted because it was easier than pushing back. And every time someone stayed quiet, that authority grew a little stronger. Not legally, but psychologically. That's how these things scale. Because silence gets interpreted as agreement. And over time, agreement gets interpreted as permission. And permission turns into entitlement. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. If nobody had pushed back, if I had just ignored it, let them fish, let them borrow the space, this would not have stopped. It would have expanded. More structures, more claims, more rules. Until one day, I'd be the one asking permission to stand on my own land. That's how slow takeovers work. Not dramatic, not overnight, just inch by inch. And look, I'm not saying every HOA is like this. Some are fine. Some actually keep things organized and functional. But the system itself? It's built on enforcement. And enforcement, without accountability, tends to drift. This is a psychological trap. People mistake familiarity for authority. They've always handled things. They seem official. Everyone else listens to them. So nobody questions where that authority actually comes from. Until it's too late. And from a practical standpoint, this is where you really need to pay attention. According to standard procedure, before you buy any property near or around an HOA, you need to check exactly where your parcel sits in relation to their jurisdiction. Not what a realtor says. Not what a neighbor assumes. The actual legal documents. Because from a legal perspective, the difference between being inside an HOA and outside of it is everything. It determines what rules apply, what power they have, and what they absolutely cannot touch. In my case, that line saved me. Literally. It gave me leverage. It gave me protection. And when things escalated, it gave me the ability to push back without asking permission. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. You don't need to be aggressive. You don't need to go looking for conflict. But you do need to know where your boundaries are, legally, mentally, and personally. Because if you don't define them, someone else will. And they might not ask. So I'm curious. If you were in that situation, if you walked down to your backyard and saw people treating it like public property, would you have handled it the same way? Would you have confronted them right there? Or done what I did? Stepped back, gather evidence, and let the system do the work? And more importantly, do you think this kind of thing only happens in extreme cases like mine? Or do you think there are smaller versions of this playing out in neighborhoods all over the place, just without cameras catching it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more of them than you'd think.